John and Jason, excuse me, coming along to one of our readings today. And the feedback from children is absolutely essential. I mean, this is a grown-up's viewpoint on the water safety pack. All of us here, anything aged from 20 through 60, etc. The children's input is absolutely critical. And I don't know how we would factor that in, but I think it's an important element. One to discuss, but I think the other point that I think will, and this is just one we've spoken before about, I think we all need to understand that there's two groups in forum here. There's commercial sector and there's governmental safety associations, etc. And they approach, but we all approach a common aim. We all want to make a difference. We want to prevent unintentional injury and death, of course. We are both funded in different ways. One group is funded by a government organisation. The other is self-funded and drive their operation forward on that basis. To fill in a document of this nature, the answer would probably flood back, so just that's up to you if you want to put it in or not. Take the risk. Concepts that are being developed on a commercial basis, of whatever, to land down effectively your business plan, your strategic plan, your brain, onto a document like that that is open to the wider community, of which governmental organisations could look to take on board, hoist on board, etc. We nod our heads, we don't know, versus other commercial entities that could look. Yes, the opinion is valuable, of course it is, but when you actually, I think that just needs to be viewed, as I say, governmental organisations don't think necessarily going to be worried about that. Commercial entities, that's what CSEC is set up to do, to create the balance between the two. And there are governmental organisations, ROSPA for example. Well,
ROSPA is a third sector organisation. We are, as well as receiving government funding, we generate our own funds, we're a charity,
with commercial entity. And I think it is fair to say that an organisation of such size, here we are waving ideas around in front of each other towards a common aim, and we can all say it's fantastic towards a common aim, but that is the answer that you're going to get from commercial groups, or certainly the smaller commercial groups.
Nobody's saying you must do this.
No, I've just said that. That's the reason.
It's optional, and the data's private to you.
And you can do it on paper, so you don't. There will be a paper version as well. You don't have to go anywhere near the website if you don't want to.
Unless, but if you wanted to go, as you said, John, up to the assessment thing when the narrative is placed.
I think we're looking for attributes of that can be audited into. Let's say we're not just a lot quicker in trying to ensure. We are not passing judgment on the content, the message, or the technical excellence of it in terms of its design content. So the intrinsic value of the item is still very much in the view of it. All we're doing here is having a fairly mechanical, almost clunky, because all of it, we know that. We make it
Mechanical is a good word.
Pardon?
Mechanical is a good word. No, it is. It's a mechanistic.
It's intended to say to us, can we first of all catalogue this? That's part one. If we haven't got a date on it, we don't know who produced it and what the area is, we can't catalogue it, even if we wanted to. And the second part is, does this resource see itself, can it signpost and make itself part of the whole community approach? Even if it can't do the practical safety education bit, but it's part of a wider integrated programme. That's what part 2 is. And part 3, quite simply, is about, does this in itself, or does it in itself encourage practical activity? That's all this does, honestly. It might say more than that, but that's certainly its intention. Can we catalogue this so that we can differentiate it from other people? Can we see this as being a natural and being a natural part of the whole community activity? Because that's what we want to do. That's what CSEC wants to do. And the last one is, does it in itself represent practical activity, or does it point the way to some practical activity?
Fully support the use of it, John. Yeah, I've worked on certain those elements with you. I fully support it. And all I'm saying is, my comment on the commercial aspect is that we're wanting to develop something here that is user-friendly, that everyone wants to get involved in, provide more information to. And that's all I'm saying, that we must ensure that that is something that is considered. That's my view.
We're getting smaller. It's got smaller constituents. Yeah. We want to make it as small as is meaningful and useful. We do not want to have items in there which are adding time, which means cost commercially, but don't add value. So if there are questions in there, if there are points in there that you, after consideration, say, this didn't add anything at all, we'd be really pleased to hear that, because we can actually make this whole thing a little bit smaller.
John, the schedule, my apologies, somebody else coming in. Right, the schedule that Jason had that you asked us in the workshop to complete is an incredibly complex piece of assessment. My only question is, I've got no problem with the complexity, because I'm sure that you can bring it down to something very meaningful, such as through this. But my question is, with all respect to Jason, who is in education, was in educationalist, has anyone else had an input to setting up those criteria, an educational or educational group, for instance? Because that, I think, is where the impact of that's going to be, isn't it?
Can I answer that? It originated as a document called the 10 Principles of Effective Safety Education, which was I researched and wrote, commissioned by DCSF for the PSHE Association. And it was tested by 10 organisations who produced a range of different resources, including some that were outside the classroom, outdoor and adventurous activities, some that were paper-based, some that were DVDs and so on. And if you go back to that original document, you'll see who the people were who contributed to the development of the original 10 principles.
And that's been drawn out.
That's been drawn out.
Thank you very much. Excellent.
Yeah.
Yes.
And those 10 principles are based on a thorough review of the literature, peer-reviewed literature at the time, what makes effective safety education. So several steps back. Yes.
Jason and I have made some really, and I know that wasn't the point of your question, but we have offered it to, and we have spoken to people that we should have a view on this, and now we're asking you to have a view. And it's unfortunate you have the graveyard shift, and I apologise.
I'll get you back.
From the bottom of my heart.
I think there were a couple more questions that Clyde, did you?
No, I was just wanting to pick up on the point and tying in the point John made about the triangulation of the evaluations, point Tristan was making with involving focus groups, and I think that's would be part of the process of when you ask CSEC to review it, to create a fully informed evaluation for the other stakeholders, is to go to a focus group and get them to complete as well. So you've got the 3 points, and I've made note, maybe something we need to discuss later, is looking at the evaluation of the profile completed by the provider, completed by a stakeholder, CSEC, and the end user, and then compiling those 3 to create a triangulation of the evaluation effect to see does it meet the criteria. Are my views of that measure the same as yours? Let's moderate it and then come up with a choice on that. So I think that may be a way to work with the provider to help inform other members of CSEC